I bet you don't know what this is because I've only just found out about it as well. So basically it's like a little mini screwdriver that you can use to take off these screws on your needle plate. And here is exactly why you need to do this, right? So pop that puppy right on up and look at that. I don't know whether I'm horrified or satisfied, but let's just take it as a sign that this is a very well used and loved sewing machine. Okay, and then you just put that needle plate back and screw the screws back in. Kind of goes with the name. So if you enjoyed this, you're welcome, I guess, and follow if you want. How to thread a sewing machine. Part 1. Place your Gutterman thread on the spool pin at the top of your sewing machine. Take your thread through the thread guide, taking it down and up, making sure to go behind the take-up lever, and then down towards the needle. Some sewing machines have these hooks that keep the thread in line when you sew, and then thread your needle front to back. Now for the bobbin. Remove the free arm from your machine and release the bobbin case. Place your wound bobbin inside the bobbin case and so that it rotates anti-clockwise. Guide the thread down the side of the bobbin case and click it back into your sewing machine. You can pull up the threads by rotating the hand wheel and bringing up the bobbin thread to the top of your sewing machine. Now you're all set to sew. If you want to learn more about sewing and setting up your sewing machine, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. If you join elastic ends like this, please don't, because overlapping elastic ends like that is one of my biggest sewing icks, so I'm going to show you how to do it even better. So what you're going to do, get your elastic, open that puppy right on up, and then with your two ends, place them end to end so they kiss, and get your bias binding, or you can use a piece of scrap fabric, whatever, I don't really care, and then just wrap those two ends together like so, pin it together so that it all stays nice and secure. Go over to your sewing machine and you're going to sew a square on top of that, pretty basic, pivot at each corner and then crissy-crossy over the middle so that you make a little kiss, and then make sure that you back stitch and then needle up and dismount. And there you have it, the perfect elastic without that horrible overlapping multiple threads. You're so welcome. And of course, if you enjoyed this sewing tutorial and this voiceover, make sure to hit like, save and follow because I'm hilarious and why wouldn't you? I'm a joy to be around. Goodbye.
A lot of people don't know this, but try this. If you're sewing a corner, make sure that you lift up your presser foot and insert a length of thread in between your fabric layers. Put the presser foot back down and walk your needle over one stitch. Then you're going to lift up the presser foot again and put those threads off to one side and insert it in between your layers of fabric, keeping it out of reach of the next seam you're going to do. Presser foot back down and finish your seam as you normally would, obviously back stitching at the end. Then this is where the magic happens. Clip your seam to remove that bolt and turn your fabric inside out. Here you'll grab those threads and pull until the point is at the corner. Isn't that amazing? If you've enjoyed these sewing tips and tricks, make sure to like, save and follow for more. Aren't you sick of this happening? You go out to pull out your fabric and there are multiple thread tails. This is because your sewing machine thinks it's in between a stitch. To solve this, rotate the hand wheel towards you, allowing the needle to drop down and finish the stitch on your machine. Make sure you rotate the hand wheel towards you, as this will prevent damage to your machine's gears. If you enjoyed learning about sewing, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
I've been sewing for 20 years, and this is what I wish I knew as a beginner. There are two different types of threads, overlocking cones and Gutterman sewing thread. Now, you may think that these two can be used interchangeably, but that is where you are wrong. Overlocking thread is typically made out of cotton, therefore has a short fibre that is easy to snap. But using it in combination with other cones, the thread is perfect for overlocking, using the loops of the thread to seal the raw edge of the fabric. Whereas Gutterman sewing thread is the workhorse of your handmade wardrobe. I tend to use the polyester range due to its strength and durability. Used for seams, top stitching, edge stitching and decorative stitches, Gutterman can really do it all. If you're new to sewing and want to learn more, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
Do you know that if you get 2 pins and pin them to your ironing board, you can actually make yourself a perfect bias binding maker? See, get your bias binding strip and thread it underneath the pins, folding them inwards, and then iron to hold the folds. This makes perfect bias binding every single time. If you enjoyed this sewing hack, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
How to thread a sewing machine, part 3, winding a bobbin. Start off with your thread on the spool pin and then take it over to the tension control disc. Placing your thread in between the discs, as this will help remove the slack in the thread as it goes from the spool over to the bobbin. Get your Birch Creative bobbin like this one I have here with the hole in the top. Thread your bobbin from the inside to the out, ensuring that your thread winds onto the bobbin correctly. It should look like this, the thread going from the inside to the outside. Place your bobbin on the bobbin winder. Put your sewing machine into bobbin winder mode by clicking it to the right. Whilst holding the thread tail up, apply gentle pressure to your foot pedal to start winding. When your thread is well established, use a pair of snips to cut away the excess thread tail and continue to wind until full. When it's time to remove your bobbin from the bobbin winder, use a pair of snips to cut the thread tail and remove from the bobbin winder. And there you have it, a full bobbin ready to sew with. If you enjoyed this reel, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. This right here, this is a tracing wheel, and it will soon become your best friend when you start drafting your own sewing patterns. You see this grain line? Well, what you're going to do is, using a ruler to guide your tracing wheel, go over the grain line. This perforates the paper, allowing you to flip over your pattern piece and have an identical grain line. For extra bonus points, you can always use a pen to make it easier to see. By using the tracing wheel on your sewing patterns, you can alter your lay plans, allowing you to cut your sewing projects more efficiently. If you enjoyed this reel, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. Do you want to know the sewing community's best kept secret? It's this, a French curve ruler. Simply print out, glue to some heavy cardstock and then cut out your free download French curve ruler. These are amazing for necklines and armholes to level up any sewing project. If you like this reel, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. How to thread a sewing machine, part 1. Place your Gutermann thread on the spool pin at the top of your sewing machine. Take your thread through the thread guide, taking it down and up, making sure to go behind the take-up lever, and then down towards the needle. Some sewing machines have these hooks that keep the thread in line when you sew, and then thread your needle front to back. Now for the bobbin. Remove the free arm from your machine and release the bobbin case. Place your wound bobbin inside the bobbin case and so that it rotates anti-clockwise. Guide the thread down the side of the bobbin case and click it back into your sewing machine. You can pull up the threads by rotating the hand wheel and bringing up the bobbin thread to the top of your sewing machine. Now you're all set to sew. If you want to learn more about sewing and setting up your sewing machine, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. Let's go! I love this top, but I don't like fast fashion, so I'm just gonna make it. This is what I love about sewing. I can literally see someone wearing something that I like and just think like, oh my god, I'm just gonna make that. Having the ability to sew my own clothes not only allows me to make unique one-off pieces, but I can step away from the fast fashion industry for good. I got this really cute little cowboy hat just from scrolling on Pinterest and then printed it off and pinned it to the front of my top. Then, using a needle and thread, I just traced over the design and it only took me like 20-25 minutes. And then I just want to do this to all my clothes now because it's so super easy, because you just tear off the excess and you're left with this beautiful, unique one-off design. I love my top and I still hate fast fashion. Follow along if you want to sew your own clothes, because come on, it's great.
One of my sewing pet peeves is bulky hems. It's just no bueno. So instead, grab your snips and snip into the seam allowance and distribute the bulk in different directions. Then fold your seam allowance. This not only makes it so much more easier to sew, but also provides a nice clean finish for your final garment. If you enjoyed this sewing tutorial, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. I've been sewing for nearly 20 years. How on earth did I not know about this sewing hack? So if you're sewing with spaghetti straps, what you're going to do with your overlocker is create like a really long tail. Get that tail and sandwich it in between your strap. Then start overlocking the edges and keep that little overlocking tail to the very end and then snip it off. Then what you're going to do is pull that tail through. How on earth did I manage to get this far in sewing without knowing this hack? Well, now you know it. You are so welcome, and make sure to like, save and follow for more.
I'm going to repair my pants using this. Here's how. Single-use plastic often ends up polluting our ocean and waterways. It's a massive problem, but change is possible. Buttonhole is tackling this issue head-on by recycling single-use plastic into sewing threads. With the signature strength and durability of polyester, this recycled thread lets me create long-lasting pieces without compromising on quality. I believe that repairing and mending your clothes is one way to engage with sustainable fashion, and using a recycled thread is a step in the right direction. Sustainable fashion is about repairing and mending what you already own, keeping your clothes in your wardrobe and out of landfill. If you want to learn more about how to repair and sew your own clothes, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more.
This is the #1 sewing mistake when sewing with bias binding. By placing one end directly on top of the other and sewing, it turns out like this. The strips are off center and misaligned. Here's how you fix it. Place your bias binding ends one on top of another, but staggering the ends by 1 centimeter. Pin and sew between the two valleys to join the two ends together. This not only aligns the two ends perfectly, but also distributes the bulk of the seam, leaving you with perfect bias binding every time. Make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
I'll let you in on a little secret. I love hand sewing my clothes, even though it is more labor and time intensive than on a sewing machine. The hack to hand stitching is to choose the correct needle, something that is easy to do with birch. I tend to use their sharps range as it is the perfect match for this neckline facing. Hand sewing not only allows you more control over your sewing project, it is also a great excuse to watch Netflix as you sew. Taking sewing back to its original roots with needle and thread gives you a real sense of ownership over your clothes, as it is truly handmade in every way. If you want to learn more about sewing, make sure to hit like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
This sewing hack has saved me more than once. To open up your buttonhole, simply place a pin at the top and the bottom just before the bar tacks. Insert your unpicker and gently press down. By placing the pins at each end, this provides a natural stop for your unpicker, making sure you don't tear the whole thing wide open. If you like this sewing hack, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
This sewing hack will allow you to sew multiple sizes from one sewing pattern. Firstly, tape together and cut out the largest size possible of your sewing pattern. Then, grab a handy dandy highlighter and trace around your desired size of your sewing pattern. With a pair of fabric scissors, snip into your sewing pattern, touching your desired size. This comes in super useful for multiple nested sewing patterns. With these folds, you can then fold them back, allowing you to access your desired size. If you enjoyed this sewing hack, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. You have to see this to believe it. When top stitching denim, this will be your saving grace. You may have heard of top stitching, but did you know you can get the desired strength and look of top stitching with your Buttonhole thread? So not 1, not 2, but 3 lines of stitching all on top of one another to create your mock top stitching look. This not only gives you the added strength of your seams, but also gives you the look of top stitching without the hassle of changing your thread or needle. If you like this sewing hack, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
You may have heard of edge stitching, but here's how you do it. Get your fabrics and lie them right sides together, and then you're going to pin along the raw edge of your fabric. Take it over to your sewing machine and sew at 1 centimeter. Then with your iron, press the seam allowance open. Cut back the lining fabric seam allowance by half so that it's around 0.5 centimeters. Now you're going to press that longer seam allowance back over the one you've just cut. Then take it over to your sewing machine and stitch along the edge. This is how you get perfect edge stitching every time. If you enjoyed this sewing tutorial, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. I know you want to know how I get my gathers so perfect every time.
So I'm going to show you. Thread up your sewing machine like you normally would and change your stitch length to 4. This will be your gathering stitch. Then sew 2 parallel lines of stitching 0.5 and 1.5 away from the raw edge of your fabric. Then gather the 2 top lines of thread and pull. This will create gathers in your fabric, and just shimmy down the gathers all the way, and then you're going to pin it to your other piece of fabric. Here we go. Then over to the sewing machine and stitch at your normal stitch length in the middle, and then you can remove those gathering stitches. It's also super useful if you used a contrasting color so you can remove the stitches more easily. And there you have it, perfect gathers every single time. Make sure to like, save and follow this reel so that when you do your next sewing project, your gathers can be perfect. Save this reel and thank me later. One of the best sewing hacks is seam stacking, where you place one seam on top of another and place a pin through the stitch line, aligning both layers of fabric. When sewing over the pin, take it slow and even walk your needle and foot if you have to, but do not take out the pin. Using this method of seam stacking aligns the seams perfectly each and every time. If you enjoyed this reel, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
Hey you, don't overlook this overlocking hack. If you're anything like me, I tend to just normally cut off these thread tails, but now I just get a really big eyed needle like this one here, thread it up and then thread it through those last couple of chains of stitch, push it all the way up and then thread the tail back up through them. This not only keeps it secure, but nice, neat and tidy. I bet you didn't know about this sewing hack. So, snip your linen with your little snips and then pull apart the fabric until you get these loose fibers here. And then you're just gonna pull all the way along the fabric, kind of like gathering it a bit, I guess. And then what you want to do is make sure that that thread is getting pulled all the way along the fabric until it snaps, and then you've got this seemingly perfect line that you can just cut, and you've got a perfect grain line. So like, you're so welcome, I guess. This has to be every sewer's worst nightmare, a broken needle. Now we're going to change that by holding the needle in our fingertips and rotating the needle clamp towards us. Oh look, pop, comes right out. Then what you're going to do obviously is kind of like grab your new needle, and what you're going to do is make sure that that flat bit is going to be facing the back of the machine. It's self-explanatory because the needle shaft is only one size and your needle is only one size, so you're going to pop that puppy right up there and tighten your needle clamp because we don't want that needle going anywhere. And as always, if you enjoyed this sewing tutorial, make sure to like, save and follow for more. You've been using your arm picker incorrectly. Instead of picking at the stitches, try this. Place the red ball under the stitch line and push upwards. You're welcome. And as always, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
As someone who's been sewing for nearly 20 years, I have a lot of sewing patterns, and this is how I store them. Firstly, I use a hole punch to clip a hole in the top of my sewing pattern, then I get a snap ring like that, and a rail hook like this one, and then I take it over to my storage, which is a rail in my sewing studio. Lovely. And as always, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
No overlocker? No problem. Check your sewing machine and find a similar stitch to this one. To change the stitch type, just rotate your stitch selector dials on your machine. Place your fabric underneath the presser foot and start sewing. The trick here is to sew as close as you can to the edge of the fabric. Sew all the way along the raw edge of the fabric, and when you get to the end, backstitch and remove from your sewing machine. Pull away the loose strands and cut them off with some snips or scissors. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. This has to be my most requested sewing hack. First of all, thread up your machine as you normally would. You know how we like to keep it nice and simple here. And then close that bad boy up. Make sure you have a long thread tail and increase your stitch lengths to the highest possible number. Then, as you start to sew, we're not going to do a back stitch, but we're just going to pinch the top thread as we sew. This will cause your fabric to gather up behind your sewing machine foot, and it makes for perfect gathering every time.
If you found this tutorial useful, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
Stop what you're doing and watch this. On your sewing machine, you should have an automatic needle threader. It helps you to thread your needle, and if you're like me, sometimes you need a little bit of help. Pull down the needle threader and engage it with your needle. Place your thread in between the teeth and release, allowing the thread to be pulled through to the back of the needle. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks. I posted this reel a week ago, and some of you were shocked. So today I'm going to show you how to sharpen your fabric scissors with tinfoil. Firstly, get a roll of tinfoil and tear off a sheet. Fold the tinfoil in half several times until you have multiple layers built up. Get your fabric scissors and cut through the layers, making sure to keep your fingers away from the blades. The longer the cuts, the better. The layers of tinfoil sharpen the blades by removing minor blemishes or debris, allowing you to cut with less friction. And there you have it, an easy and quick way to sharpen your fabric scissors. If you enjoyed this reel, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
What is this? And what does it do? This is the presser foot lever. It allows you to manually raise and lower the presser foot. Lift it to slide your fabric underneath and lower it to start sewing. The presser foot lever also comes in handy when you are pivoting your fabric. Just place the needle in the downward position, lift the presser foot lever, allowing you to pivot your fabric, and then lower the presser foot lever again and continue to sew as normal. If you ever want to change your sewing machine foot, simply place the presser foot in the upward position, remove your old foot, and insert your new one. Couldn't be simpler. If you enjoyed learning all about your sewing machine, make sure to comment the word beginner and I'll send you the sign up link to the beginner's guide to sewing. And as always, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.
Does your bobbin look like this? It probably has something to do with your tension disc. A tension disc's job is to regulate the tension of your thread from the thread spool to the bobbin winder. The trick is to make sure the thread goes in between the tension discs and rotates in a clockwise direction. It goes thread spool, tension disc, and then bobbin winder. This process will ensure that your thread is under constant tension during the bobbin winding process. If you found this tutorial helpful, make sure to like, save and follow for more sewing tips and tricks.